We are live. Hello here for the TGO podcast. It is Tuesday, July 14th. Thank you very much for joining us live here on twitch.tv/gaming_observer or the podcast host of your choice, or the YouTube channel, coincidentally. As always, I am joined by my esteemed co-host, KATOSEPE. Kato, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing tremendously well. Thank you for joining us. And we have a very fun docket here today. And so we're just going to kick things right off with the news. So recently we had an event, or multiple game events that, I'll just get into it. So the first one was the Devolver Direct, which is the annual show that Devolver Digital likes to do. That happened on Saturday the 11th. And then Ubisoft had their conference called Ubisoft Forward the day after that. We were thinking about doing like an event coverage show that, broke down everything that was going to happen in those shows, or everything that did happen in those shows, like we like to do with the events like this. But it turned out that there just wasn't a tremendous amount of stuff happening in those shows, so we didn't feel it was necessary. We can kind of just talk about the highlights here on the show, talk about our thoughts about them. But, kind of right off the bat, what was your impression of both of those shows?
We're fine. If you wanted more information about games that have already been announced, then you got a little bit of that. I don't know. It was like a trickle. There was a little bit of new information about Assassin's Creed, Watch Dogs Legion, but nothing massive. Certainly nothing worthy of its own individual show. It's a recap. Even honestly, for all three of them combined.
Yeah. So we'll just start off here with the Devolver show, and we can kind of just break down the various things that they talked about. So, Devolver is basically, it was the same thing that they always do. It was, every single year at E3, they put on this very high production kind of meta storyline show where they talk about, what's going on at E3, and then kind of take jabs at what the other companies are doing, and then, kind of interspersed through this meta storyline, they talk about the video games that they're actually publishing. In this case, the big headliner was Shadow Warrior 3. They announced it just a few days ago, a few days before the event happened, and then they headlined it. Like, that was like the first thing that happened in the show, basically, was they showed off Shadow Warrior 3. I would say not much to say about it other than the fact that it looks more like more Shadow Warrior. They've got a grappling hook now, and it's coming in 2021. But otherwise, and this is kind of the sense that you get from everything that we're going to talk about here, but it's kind of like they showed the game.
But it has a grappling hook, so you're obviously pre-ordering this, right?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, Shadow Warrior, cool. If that's what you're into.
If that's what you're into, yeah, and that definitely applies to everything they showed off. They showed off Fall Guys, which I think is a super exciting game. That's like, a whole bunch of people doing a bunch of mini games in a battle royale format where, the last person standing becomes the winner, and it's not just a first person shooter like every other battle royale. They showed off Carrion, which was this I don't know, how would you describe Carrion? It's a
You play in the movie The Thing, except you are the Thing. That is how I would describe Carrion. I actually got to play it a little bit at PAX last year. Back 50 years ago, I got to play it, and it was fun. It's interesting. It kind of feels like a stealth, maybe Metroidvania. Maybe I didn't really get enough sense to know if it kind of has that level of world, but it kind of felt like that 2D. You're kind of like sneaking through air vents and going through like that. It was interesting. I'm definitely looking forward to it, but it feels like it needs to release at this point. Like, I feel like I've seen enough of it, and I'm kind of like, okay, I'm just ready for it to come out now.
Yeah,
see how it is.
They've definitely been, basically showing off the game every time that Devolver Digital has some kind of event.
Yeah.
And so they showed that game off. It looks great. They showed off a game called Elijah, Olija. This was another sort of. It seemed like they had two games. They had the side-scrolling pixel art game, and they had the Shadow Warrior, like, lots of guns, lots of shooting, because they showed off Serious Sam 4 later on. So Elijah, it's another side-scrolling pixel game. It kind of has some horror elements to it, very intense combat, lots of harpooning, and I don't know. They showed off the game. It didn't look particularly like it stand out, but it's another game.
And it's Olija.
I believe so.
Elijah, yeah. So, just if you're googling it, for those listening on the podcast and whatnot.
And then they showed off Serious Sam 4, which again, I put it in my notes here. It's more Serious Sam. Lots of guns, lots of explosions, lots of demons. And they've announced that that's coming in August of this year, so right around the corner. And then I guess the only like real new thing that it kind of tied in with the thing that they like to do with their events. They call this a marketing simulator. It's called Devolver Land Expo, and basically the whole idea is it's a walking simulator where you go through an abandoned expo, an abandoned convention center, and they have these virtual booths of all the games that they showed off, basically. So you could find the trailer for Carrion there with a fun little booth set up for the game, and they just have a whole bunch of that within. And I thought that was a fun idea.
Imagine if they expanded that and you could actually go through kind of like a PAX kind of thing where you're walking around and can play the demos for the games, and maybe it's like multiplayer and you can see like other people walking around. Yeah. I'm just saying, like, there's something there. It could be really neat, but I don't know. Maybe that's just PlayStation Home. I think I just described PlayStation Home back on like the PS3, but yeah. Anyway, I think it's cool.
Yeah, for sure. And then I guess the other thing I want to touch on from this is I want to get your thoughts on how long the show was, I guess, because I feel like, they showed off 5 games or so, and it was 45 minutes long. And each of those game spotlights were less than a minute or, a minute and a half, something like that. It was a lot of storyline, a lot of acting, and I thought it was great, but I felt like, in my opinion, it was just a little too long. And it was broken up nicely, right? Like, they had a lot of guest features. They had Phil Spencer, Yoshida, who, does a lot with PlayStation. They had Bennett Foddy from Getting Over It with Bennett Foddy, Sonic Fox, and they even, had Geralt and stuff like they were doing a whole bunch of fun stuff. Jeff Keighley was there. Yeah. But I feel like it's still, that was a nice stuff that they had going on, but it still could have been a little shorter.
If this was... If this was in one of those days, like when we did the PC gaming show and stuff like that, I would have been so annoyed with all of the things that they were doing. But they're not connects, but they're directs. Yeah, are always like this. Yeah, they always have this, like you said, a meta storyline going on that they've been doing for years, and I find it kind of strange, but I know a lot of people really like it, and it was funny. I laughed several times. I loved their jokes about their uncle that works at Nintendo.
Yes, that's right.
So, yeah, I mean, it was really funny. It didn't have a lot of content overall, but I guess that's been pretty par for the course this year. So nobody quite knows what they're doing yet. So.
The show that came after that came just a day after, and it was the Ubisoft Forward event. Probably fairly underwhelming, I would say. They really built this up to be this big event, and they're going to give away Watch Dogs 2 if you watch the show, and we're going to give you all of this stuff. And then really they didn't show a tremendous amount, but maybe especially from games that maybe people were expecting, stuff that has been announced but hasn't been given a lot of details or just whatever it was. But in this case, we're going to break it down here. You're going to see that there just wasn't a whole lot there. They started off, and I guess we can just talk about these games a little bit as we go through. Watch Dogs Legion was kind of their headliner. They had some cinematics. They had some for a lot of these games. They had behind the scenes stuff. So in this case, they talked to a level artist just to see what it's like to build a level for Watch Dogs Legion. They had a short film with an actual film director to sort of market the game. And I don't know, I think the game is actually going to, at least in storyline, Watch Dogs Legion looks really cool to me. I don't know if, I know Watch Dogs 2 was fairly middling. The first game was fairly middling. I don't know if that's going to continue, but at least in terms of critical reception.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
It was pretty, at least I recall it being fairly well received. I know, like, fan reception wasn't as strong. I don't know, maybe I'm misremembering, but it was certainly better than 1.
Right.
The thing I'm worried about with Legion, in particular with the storyline, is that everything in the trailers, everything that they've expressed, has shown this very political storyline, which is fine. I have no problem with that whatsoever. The problem is that Ubisoft has been very public about the fact that they do not want to be political.
Yep.
And Assassin's Creed has kind of shown that, where they have this story where on paper it sounds like very, maybe not profound, but like a very deep storyline that never winds up going anywhere and never winds up saying anything because it doesn't want to offend anybody. I'm really worried that Watch Dogs Legions is going to be that, where it sounds like it would be something intense and deep and actually is pretty shallow. Other than that, the game looks great. I actually am looking forward to trying it, especially the recruitment stuff and being able to recruit and train people with different abilities. It sounds cool. I hope it lives up to that.
Yes, I also made note of this in my notes when I was watching the show, because the opening cinematic for Legion, or this little short film that they made, literally the guy that's narrating is like, first they came for the foreigners, then they came for the protesters, then they came for the journalists, and I'm like, am I remembering wrong that Ubisoft was the one saying their games weren't political? And then I had to do like some Googling to be like, am I mixing them up with someone here? It's like, no, they are leaning so heavily into this, and yet the messaging that they have online is totally different. It's incredibly strange, because that feels like such a transparent thing that, like, how does anybody get fooled by that, I guess?
But all their games are like that.
Yeah.
All of their games. Assassin's Creed is all about, like, the Pope, and Christianity is mind controlling everybody, and, we have to take down the Templars. And, Far Cry had, at least on paper, tons of political, statements, but none of them wind up saying anything.
Yeah.
Not really. So I think that's how they justify it. They make those statements that we're not political. Well, it's kind of because we take these premises and then don't want to offend anyone.
Yeah. What followed after Legion was like 4 in a row, bang, 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 of like, hey, this game exists. So they had Brawlhalla, Might and Magic Era of Chaos, Tom Clancy's Elite Squad, and Rainbow Six Siege. All 4 of those games probably could have had some kind of segment on them, but really it was like, here's 45 seconds of the game, and they're like, hey, like, especially in the case of Siege, they were like showing off a bunch of Siege, and then they were like, hey, this game exists, and it's going great. The community's awesome. Thanks for being there. It's like, okay, sure, great.
That's it.
Moving on, they showed off Hyperscape. This was kind of like their mid-show big hitter. It's their new battle royale. So they announced this a few weeks ago. They had some some Twitch streamers playing the game. And they just spend a lot of, again, this is another problem I'm having with these game events. They show off a cinematic, they're like explaining the story. They're being like, oh, we spent a lot of time looking at the characters of Hyperscape and wondering, would this character actually want to wear this outfit? All meanwhile, they haven't even shown off any gameplay yet. They're releasing a battle royale in July of 2020, and they're talking about the character motivation, not why people should play this battle royale over the other battle royales. I hate to complain about all of these shows, because I really do want to find, like, maybe the game is tremendous, and I would love to talk about that, but I wouldn't know, because they didn't show anything. It's going to be a free-to-play game going into open beta. That's pretty much all I can. They showed off maybe, like a gameplay trailer, but they didn't show off a whole lot of gameplay. So if you want to find that, you're gonna have to go out of your way to find it.
It's really worth mentioning whenever someone is releasing a new game, what it is they talk about in regards to that game. Like, I remember when they showed off, not Ubisoft, but they showed off Anthem for the first time, which we all know how that wound up going. Their first statement, they showed a little cinematic trailer, and then they brought some people out from the team and talked about how you could buy things with microtransactions to customize the look of your character.
Right.
Like that terrified me, and obviously rightfully so. Like, so no, when they are not able to explain to you why you should play this game, especially a battle royale game in 2020, that's definitely cause for concern.
Yeah, for sure. And then kind of like we're almost at the end here. They showed off Assassin's Creed Valhalla. One thing I found really interesting is that they actually took their team and they went to Norway and they tried to like live the Viking experience. Even though, again, that's not really something I care about when it comes to the game and you know, whatever my thoughts are about the game, I actually thought seeing that was really cool. I want to see like a Ubisoft documentary of their team going to Norway and doing Viking stuff. I think that'd be really cool. But yeah, they did show lots of gameplay. They showed, you know, raiding English towns and setting fire to, you know, these Vikings coming in and just setting fire to everything. And that's like a gameplay mechanic, just burn down the buildings. And then they use the resources that they take from those towns to build your own settlement. It was good. I thought this was like probably the best game showcase of the whole show. They just, you know, here's the game, here's what you can do, here's what's interesting, and a little bit of behind the scenes, which never hurts.
And it looks just like The Witcher 3, and I'm very okay with that. If it is, honestly, if this game comes out and it's The Witcher 3 with settlement building,
mm-hmm.
I will be ecstatic. I will be thrilled.
And then they closed out the show with the announcement of a game which unfortunately did get leaked a few days beforehand, but Far Cry 6 now announced, and they had this really, really cool cinematic and story element thing where Giancarlo Esposito, who is the main villain Gus Fring from Breaking Bad, he is one of the major characters of the game. And it was actually interesting the way they started this off, because it was like a fairly lengthy cinematic, like, you know, announcing the game. But they spent the first like 60 seconds of this cinematic just like rolling credits. And I felt like that was such a weird thing that, like, it felt like it was like stalling right in the middle of the show. But anyway, I genuinely saw Gus Fring from Breaking Bad. I saw his face and I was like, is that a real man? I had to like take a second. The CGI was real good, because especially considering like it was an established actor, like everybody knows what he looks like. But anyway, Far Cry 6 announced it's coming on February 18th of next year, and they didn't say anything else really. But it looks, you know, like at least in terms of story elements, it looks great.
Expect more Far Cry. If you've enjoyed Far Cry 3, 4, and 5, you will probably enjoy Far Cry 6. It doesn't sound like they're changing the formula up. At least I would assume they would have announced that and said that if they were. But I mean, those games have been fun.
Yeah. And they have announced that there is another Ubisoft forward on the way, which, considering all of the games that, you know, people were expecting and didn't see, maybe not surprising. But I also question, you know, did we need this Ubisoft forward? Could we have just waited until the next one and had, you know, more to see? But nonetheless, those two shows. You definitely don't need to go out of your way to see them, unless you're maybe super interested in the meta storyline that Devolver Digital likes to do, and you don't want to feel left out when they start referencing it at the next E3. But I digress. The next thing, or any closing thoughts on those two shows before we move on here?
You said if you're specifically looking forward to one of those games and desperately want more, this probably won't satiate that desire, but you will have a little bit more to see. Yeah, and Far Cry 6 should have been the big announcement, but because it was leaked, we kind of already knew that it was coming. Plus, it's just, honestly, if you look at a calendar, it's been a few years since Far Cry 5, so it's time for Far Cry 6.
Yeah. Okay, so the next thing we want to talk of here is hot off the press. It just came earlier today. Google Stadia has announced that they have a number of new games heading to the service, including some exclusives. So one of the exclusives games is called Outcasters, which is a game from the developers of Gears Tactics. And if you remember an older game called Brink, which was going to be this really big FPS back in the day, it never ended up coming out, or at least succeeding. But you saw Outcasters or whatever, the gameplay of it. I didn't see it, so tell me what it's like.
So the art style looks very much like the Rabbids, Ubisoft's Rabbids.
Okay.
It looks almost identical to that, which was weird. Kind of like that mix. I guess a little bit of Fall Guys mixed in there, but it looks like you play. It looks like a multiplayer focused game where you it's kind of a top down shooter, and you can curve your bullets. You have these like laser beam kind of things. It actually kind of looks like you're shooting like basketballs or something. I don't know.
Okay.
It's weird. But they curve it around, and it wasn't really clear how that happens or what kind of control mechanism there is for that. But the trailer talked about doing trick shots to take out enemies. I don't know. It didn't really explain if it's like a battle royale or if it's just like a 4v4 deathmatch. I'm not really sure. But it looked like kind of a arena multiplayer, kind of goofy, fun time.
Cool. Yeah, so that's going to be a Stadia exclusive. Another exclusive is the announcement of Orcs Must Die 3, which is, of course, a tower defense game, I guess you could call it, with orcs. And I only played the first game. I don't know what you've played, but I remember having a good time with it.
Yeah, I've played 1 and 2. They're a lot of fun. I really like it multiplayer. I was actually really bummed because I saw this announcement that Orcs Must Die 3 was announced, and I was really excited. And I'm like, yeah, Orcs Must Die 3, that's great. I love that genre of game, and always am looking forward to more of that kind of multiplayer. I know the first one wasn't multiplayer, but the second one was. But that multiplayer kind of third person, you run around and shoot things, but also tower defense.
Yep.
But then I heard it was Stadia exclusive, and that really bummed me out.
Yeah, so if you would like to play Orcs Must Die 3, you can play it for free if you have a Stadia Pro subscription, or you can buy it individually for $30. And that is there. I don't know if these are timed exclusives or just exclusives all the time. That's a good question. It might be varying depending on what their contract is, but they've also announced that there are 3 more exclusives in the works. One of them is from Harmonix, who are the people behind Guitar Hero and Rock Band, Uppercut Games, who made the game City of Brass, and Supermassive Games, who did Until Dawn. So all 3 of those are making a game exclusively for Stadia. We don't know what they are, but it is happening. They have a number of other games that are heading to the service, which already exist on other platforms or just won't be necessarily exclusive to Stadia. The ones that are standing out to me here are Dead by Daylight, PUBG, all 3 Hitman games, Serious Sam 4, NBA 2K21. Oh, Sekiro is going to head there. And Sekiro is actually an interesting one because, Stadia is game streaming, which means that inevitably you're going to have some kind of input lag. And Sekiro is a game that is very much about not having input lag and being very precise with your timings. So that'll be an interesting choice to have that there.
But having a multiplayer shooter arena is also an interesting thing to lead with for that. And they've always bragged about their service, but I've heard mixed things from people who've actually used it. We'll see.
Yeah. And then another thing worth highlighting here is that Dead by Daylight is actually going to have some features that are exclusive to Stadia, some game features. So they have 2 things now called Crowd Play and Crowd Choice, which is basically if you are a YouTube streamer, the crowd choice will let you automatically, like the audience will choose what you do in the game, who you play as, and whether or not you're the killer or the survivor. And then crowd play is going to let you do like if you're streaming Dead by Daylight and you want your audience to play with you, your audience doesn't necessarily need to own the game. They can just click a button and then they join into Dead by Daylight on like a free trial. And then you're able to play with your favorite, YouTube streamer. So that's pretty cool. But besides that,
like what Manamadan did, Supermassive Games did with their stuff.
Was that an audience integration?
I believe so, yeah. Oh, okay. And you could they have like you can play with somebody else for free. You don't have to own the game in order to do that. It's like a friends pass is what they called it.
Yeah, I've seen the friend pass, but that's kind of like you would have to take the pass that you have and specifically give it to somebody, right?
I think you download it for free on Steam, and then you can just open it up and play with anybody.
Oh, I see.
But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it is different. I'm not sure, but
Yeah, from my understanding,
yeah, it's a cool idea.
there's Man of Medan and A Way Out, I think, also did it, where I think like you buy the game and then you can give a copy of the game to a friend to play with you, or have like a guest pass or something like that. But in this case, it's literally like they're streaming the game and then you can go into Stadia and click a button and then be like, I'm joining their game now, and then boom, you're in. It's not any kind of lengthy process. Anyway.
Remind me ranting something really quickly about
go.
way gaming history is way back for all of us old folk who remember StarCraft when it first came out, had a feature called Spawn where you could just give somebody else your disc and they could install it and play multiplayer with you.
Oh, wow.
And they didn't have to own it. There was no CD keys for that. It's funny to me how this is just now starting to come back.
Right.
And it's like, hey, brand new thing. You can play with your friends without buying copies. And it's like, oh, we had this a long time ago and you guys took it away.
Right.
Anyway, that's it. That was all I had.
It's the natural cycle of consumer electronics and marketing, right? It's marketing something as new when it's not. Anything else you want to mention there before we move on?
No, Super Bomberman R Online is kind of cool if you like Bomberman. Although I think this is... I couldn't tell if this was a sequel to the Switch one or if it's just another mode or port. But if you really like Online Bomberman, then that's good. And yeah, a bunch of sports games. PGA Tour is coming back, which I thought PGA Tour went away. Maybe it didn't. I don't know. I didn't Google that. But 2K21 and then the Hello Neighbor games are going to be on there too. So if you were into those, they have that multiplayer one, the hide and seek.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's the Stadia portfolio expanding and evolving and hopefully becoming more enticing if that's something that you were looking for. The next thing we want to talk about here is something that's I find really fascinating, which is that Sony has invested quite a bit of money into Epic Games. Specifically, they've invested $250 million in return for a 1.4% stake in the company, which is quite interesting because back, I think, in 2013 or something like that, Tencent invested Sony just did $250 million. I believe Tencent did $330 million or something like that. Maybe an extra $100 million, and they got 40% of the company in return. So like just a tremendous difference in terms of how Epic Games has evolved and grown. Obviously because of Fortnite, but also because of a number of other things. It hasn't been entirely clear why Sony has invested in Epic. They haven't said much other than the fact that they're wanting to expand their relationship. There's an analyst here on Twitter who I'm going to read out here, who kind of explains a little bit more in terms of what's going on. So he says that Epic has become a major player in the entertainment space, or the interactive entertainment space. They've got the Unreal Engine, they've got Fortnite, they've got the Epic Game Store, and they have the Epic Online Services, which is their way of distributing some of the things that they've made to other third-party game developers, like, online matchmaking and stuff like that. He says that this deal is less about exclusivity of content for either company, but a broader play from Sony as a whole. In terms of gaming, Sony and Epic have already demonstrated how they're working closely, so they already do a lot of stuff together. But talking more broadly, Sony is aware of what Epic is doing in terms of converging things like games and film and music and entertainment. All of those things coming together through Fortnite is something that Sony is very interested in, because Sony does all of those things as well, at least as much as they can. So what he's saying is, hey, Sony and Epic are quite similar in the things that they're trying to achieve, and Sony is interested in bridging a gap. Well, not that there was a gap in the first place, but improving relations between the two companies. I don't know how much there is that we can say on this, but I don't know. What's your impression of this whole thing?
I just want to know who said that.
This is Daniel Ahmad, which is at ZHugeEX on Twitter. He primarily comments and provides sources for Chinese-based companies, but in general is just a good gaming business analyst.
I think the one thing we can say with pretty absolute certainty here. Is there are a lot of people after this news was announced that were I guess making up these conspiracy theories that Sony's trying to take over Epic.
Right.
That is absolutely not what's happening here. Like in no way is Sony taking over Epic with their 1.4% stake in the company. Yeah, it seems way more likely that that's the case, that they're investing in certain things like the media integration with Fortnite, but also things like Unreal Engine. Right. I mean, Unreal Engine is a very big and very common engine used in gaming, and them having a stake in it not only helps them to utilize that engine, you know, they have a relationship with Epic and can get the kind of support that they need and whatnot to build these games, but also just like allows them to have a stake in the progression of that engine and maybe fully integrating that into the PlayStation 5 and beyond, and you know, all these things. It allows them to have a bigger say in the evolution of gaming, I think, because Epic has shown that they are absolutely going to be a part of that one way or another.
Right.
So yeah, I just don't think there's any reason to get all conspiracy theorist about it, but it's just them kind of actively making their stake. You know, they're actively saying we think Epic is important and we want to continue to work with them.
Yeah, and Zeke's here in the chat says they could take over Epic, but man, would that be a massive purchase?
Oh my gosh!
And that's very much true.
So stupid.
Yeah, I believe Epic Games at this point is valued at $14 billion or something like that. Like Sony would really have to believe in Epic growing to massive proportions in order to evaluate or to justify a purchase like that. He also says I doubt Tencent would sell their stake, and that's very true. No. You know, the only option would be to buy out Tim Sweeney, who's the controlling shareholder. So either way, I mean, you're right? Like Epic Games is this with Unreal Engine and all of the things that they're doing for Fortnite and the third-party developers and stuff. Like they're really a force to contend with now. And I think certainly anybody who can improve relations with them, or, you know, improve, like with Fortnite being such a dominating space, like Fortnite is the major reason why the Epic Game Store is becoming so successful, because everybody is already there, right? And to have that kind of power behind a single video game, being associated with that is, I think, only a good thing. Yeah,
absolutely. And yeah, Zeke said again, yeah, it's sort of a we did something for you, you do something for us kind of a thing. And yeah, I think it's exactly that. It's putting their foot in their door and making sure that their voice is heard.
Right.
You know, they're not in control, but just they have a voice. They have a seat at the table.
Yeah, and also Epic has been a big proponent of that kind of thinking as well. They do a lot in terms of, like, we don't want to just be closed off doing our own thing. Like, they very much advocate for a lot of industry-changing, things. And so to actually act on that, of course, is always a good thing.
Absolutely.
So that is it for the news segment for today before we move on here. So, yeah, I guess, is there anything else you want to mention before we move on? Just checking in.
I'm glad we talked a little bit about the Stadia thing. It's interesting to me in general that they haven't abandoned it. Honestly, that was kind of what I was expecting after we haven't heard from them in a long time and they hadn't been pushing updates out to their fans or anything. I was kind of thinking the Stadia was already dead. And the fact that they have 5 new games coming is just very interesting to me. So I'm just glad we could chat about that and kind of watch what's happening. Other than that, I'm good.
What I'll say, I feel like there's a lot of like absolute statements that are often made when it comes to people like or companies like Google and Amazon coming into the picture, like this will never work, or Stadia failed now and so it's going to fail forever, or whatever it is. And I feel like in the gaming industry, like, or really any industry, there's always the chance that Stadia is going to become like the favorite thing in 2 years. You know, it just takes a mindset shift based on what they've already done, and some practical changes. But ultimately, like, I feel like we're always so quick to be like, okay, that's it, Stadia's done. And it's like, if they just do the right thing, moving forward, there's always the chance that they could recover, and we're going to forget about this period of time. You know, look at the individual games that have managed to pull that off. So of course, a level of cynicism, granted, that's totally fine. But I also agree that I think keeping an eye on these companies as they progress, like Amazon has a second chance, right? They took Crucible out of commission, they delayed New World, and then now they're going to be able to say, hey, here's our second shot at it, right? And if people give them the chance and it works, then fantastic. We're in 10 years when they're a successful game company, we're not even going to remember it. So
you're absolutely right. But cynicism is what I bring to the table, Adrian. So that is always what I'm going to present. But no, you are right. There have been numerous examples of games that launched in that state and came back. No Man's Sky is a big one. So yeah, it'd be interesting. I still don't see Stadia becoming a favorite, but you know what? Stranger things have happened.
We're going to move on here from the news, and I wanted to get into something that has been released recently. It's called Half-Life Alyx Final Hours. The Final Hours title comes from Jeff Keighley, who is a very prominent voice in the gaming industry. I believe Final Hours, like, he's applied it before to other Half-Life games, maybe for Portal as well, but weren't they just, like, articles the first time around, or, like, a video or something? Like, what, do you remember? Do you know exactly what it was?
I think he's done video documentaries before, but nothing standalone.
Okay.
Like Jeff Keighley used to work with G4 and do stuff like that on TV. I admit I'd never watched G4, but I think he's done certain video stuff before.
Okay.
But I don't know that for a fact.
Well, so he's done a bunch of Final Hours before anyway, but in this case, for Half-Life Alyx, it's basically documenting the last 10 years of game development at Valve with a focus on Half-Life Alyx through an interactive storybook. So for like $10 on Steam, you can pick up like this. Basically, it's like a design document, except with like, valuable information about, development at Valve. And there's a bunch of interactive stuff in there, which is really cool. They ended up doing this thing where you can actually go into Valve headquarters and like the development floor of Valve and just walk around and see what the floor looks like and see people's computers and the little knickknacks that they have on there and, just seeing what it's like to work at Valve. They have another portion of the storybook where you can like have your own audio designer of like the head crab or something like I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was some Half-Life enemy where you could just like play around with the audio files. Like I had some fun stuff in there. But what also is in there is a bunch of details that we had no idea about the way that Valve operates. I mean, I shouldn't say that we had no idea about, but at least some hidden details in there. So one of the things that has made the headlines, and I wanted to bring this up because you are way more familiar with the Half-Life franchise than I am, and the history of, people getting anticipated for things like Half-Life 3. One of the things that they have mentioned is that Half-Life 3 was actually attempted multiple times. They have tried to start making a Half-Life 3 at least 6 times, is what this, Final Hours thing says. And basically what it ends off with, and the thing that made all of the headlines, was that Valve had started and stopped a number of small-scale projects because, the way the culture works there is that basically anybody can work on anything. And a bunch of projects didn't work out, but then Half-Life Alyx was this, hey, let's all get together and actually make something succeed. Let's do something awesome. We're all interested in this. Let's make it happen. And they made it happen. And the final note that they kind of leave it on is, this was the icebreaker. We were really afraid of making a Half-Life 3 before, or we had all of these hang-ups about making a Half-Life 3 before, and now we've made a Half-Life game, and the ice has been broken, and we're less scared to make it, and whatever this is. And it is kind of like this note of optimism for a potential Half-Life 3 that's a mainline series game that's going to be on consoles, not just a VR game or whatever. It seemed optimistic, but I know that I don't know if they've had messaging like that before, or if that's just something that's been, people have gotten excited for no reason or whatever it is. But I don't know. I guess I kind of just wanted to get your thoughts on that.
I see this as a great step. It's definitely a sign of faith. And honestly, we talked about Half-Life Alyx. Half-Life Alyx was one of the first things we talked about on TGO podcast.
Yep.
I don't think they would have released this if they weren't confident in the idea of a Half-Life 3. I really don't think they would have, because they, like you said, they've been starting and stopping projects for Half-Life 3 for a long time, and they hadn't really announced it at any point. There were certain leaks that was being worked on, and honestly, that was pretty obvious. Assume that if fans have been calling for a sequel for something, that there have been like numerous projects in the works at those developers that just never got announced, that just didn't work out. And yeah, so I'm sure they have wanted to work on a Half-Life 3 for a long time. I'm sure that they wanted to do that, but it just wasn't working out. And with a series with that kind of pedigree, you can't just push something out. You can't just like dump some crap on the floor and be like, here, Half-Life 3. So it makes sense that they've just been waiting, but I really think if they didn't have a solid idea this time, if they didn't have something they were really confident in, some idea for what Half-Life 3 is going to be, I don't think they would have released Half-Life Alyx, no matter how good they thought Alyx was, just because it just reinforces that hey, Half-Life 3 is still not out.
Yeah. I that brings me back actually to one of the first things, like you said, Half-Life Alyx was one of the first TGO podcasts that we did, the announcement of the game, and one of the things that we mentioned there was the fact that they, like, Half-Life Alyx, we didn't know it at the time, but the game is tremendously good, and they absolutely could have called this Half-Life 3, or Half-Life whatever, like I know it's a prequel, but whatever it is, right? And so they chose not to go the marketing route of Half-Life 3, which kind of indicates that they are willing to go to a Half-Life 3 at some point. And I think that's, especially knowing what we know now, that's just becoming more and more like, yes, there's been a lot of excitement, there's been a lot of letdowns, whatever it is, but at least we know that the intent is still there, right? The idea is still there, and that's something to celebrate.
So Zeke's, it cannot be played non-VR. Half-Life Alyx cannot. Oh, well, there are mods, I guess.
So
they're in the works, but officially, no.
Yeah, there's no official support for a non-VR version of Half-Life Alyx. However, I also would not recommend that you go to the mod that allows you to play the game in non-VR, because if you actually do that, the game would be boring as sin. Like, I've seen the footage. A, it's impossible to control. Like, it looks so difficult to actually move around in that world. But B, like, if you actually play the game on the headset, you don't notice it. But it's really just a series of, like, walking, picking things up, getting into a battle encounter every now and then experiencing the story. Like, it's very rudimentary, and if you were to just play it on a PC, it would not be exciting whatsoever. I'd recommend if you don't have a VR, you just watch somebody play it on a YouTube Let's Play, or if you can hold out, get your hands on a VR headset somewhere. If a friend has it or a VR cafe has it, not that you would want to do that during the middle of a pandemic, but nonetheless, if you're able to, even if you come across it 3 years down the line, experiencing Half-Life Alyx is truly, like, I don't want to say life-changing, but it's one of the best gaming experiences I've ever had. So, Zeke
I imagine playing it. Oh,
go ahead. Go ahead.
I just imagine playing it non-VR would feel like Half-Life Surgeon Simulator, where there's just like different buttons for each finger.
Yeah.
Oh, it sounds atrocious. Yeah. I would predict, I have a prediction about Half-Life 3, that it is going to have VR support, but not be a VR exclusive. I still think with Half-Life Alyx sales, even though they were very good for VR, they were fairly average for a PC game, especially a AAA, like overall, So I'm predicting that it will not be full VR.
That's that's interesting. I don't know. I feel like how many games have come out that have been able to support both VR and a regular launch and still be the same game? There's Subnautica and there's other things that have tried to pull it off, but I've heard that they aren't, like, the best VR experiences.
Subnautica's a lot of fun in VR.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know. I feel like developing with that in mind is a lot harder. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I feel like if you want a Half-Life experience in VR, it's good to you just go get Alyx. You know what I mean?
Right. So are you saying you think it won't have VR support at all?
I mean, I don't want to say
it will be all VR.
I don't want to make
a prediction. Make a stand.
I would like, they have indicated they want to release a Half-Life game on consoles, right? So I would think that they would rather just make that a console game rather than trying to also mangle together some sort of VR support on top of that.
Fair. That's fair.
Okay, let's move on from Half-Life here. And actually, why don't we just jump into the games that we've been playing? Just because we've got 10 minutes left to go. So, actually, you start.
Failed on all accounts. Like for playing, I've been watching a lot of stuff. I've actually been pretty busy this last week. I did get about an hour more into Trails in the Sky.
Okay.
So I have. If you've played the game, I just went to the farm and fought the rabid bunnies or the cats, I guess. I don't know what they are. They're some kind of weird creatures that are like, it's such a first level quest, you know? It's like, go to this farm, and the farm owner's like, hey, someone's been stealing my crops. Stop them. And that's what I did, and that's where I stopped. So I'm still just nowhere in this game. But I did get to play Celeste, and we finished Celeste on stream on Monday. That is yesterday. I don't know what day it is anymore. But yesterday, we finished it, and I finished the core also. I was really excited. I know you were there for Chapter 7.
Yeah.
And I was jumping into the core. I was really excited about doing the core because I'd never finished it before.
Mm-hmm.
I played part of it back in the day, so I kind of knew the mechanics, but nothing beyond that. And we finished it, and I was so excited. So I'm going to do Chapter 9 next week, and I'm excited for that. And then we've been playing Borderlands 2.
Yeah.
Which has been a ton of fun, and we are... I don't remember where. Sanctuary hasn't exploded yet.
Yeah.
It doesn't explode, but you know what I'm talking about. If you played the game, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. So what is it like? You know, you just completed Celeste, and that's your third full playthrough. What are your reflections on doing it for the third time?
It's still super good.
Yeah.
Something about the platforming, I almost feel like it is... it's more fun when you know what you're doing. I don't know. There were several points on stream where I felt really cool doing stuff. I don't know if it actually looked really cool, but it certainly felt cool.
You looked so cool on stream, Kato. Don't you worry.
Yeah. Oh, I looked like a badass. But it's just fun. It's fun being able to go through those challenges that were so intense the first time that you played them, and being able to conquer them a lot more. It feels like you're getting a lot better. And that game, it's really good at having that feeling. And yes, Zeeks, the core is Chapter 8. It's like an epilogue to the main storyline of the game. Which I gotta say, if you've played Celeste and whatnot, haven't played the core or whatever, it is an optional thing, and it's a good thing that's an optional thing, because it messes with some of your core mechanics in a way that I feel like if it was in the main storyline, it would be really irritating. So, but it's fun if you want that extra challenge.
And I know that there's a number of like more challenging stuff to do that you haven't played yet. Is that something that you're planning on doing?
I don't know yet. We did start the B-sides of the first chapter, and even that I struggle with. And there's also a C-side, which is even harder, and I've never touched that before. I don't know if I want to do that on stream or not, or do that at all. I'm not sure I'm ready for that, but we'll figure it out. Maybe.
Too afraid of not looking cool when you play Celeste.
Exactly. I can't look bad on the internet.
Okay.
No, it just has a lot of those moments where it's almost like you don't know what you're supposed to be doing. You know, it's a lot more likely that you're not even sure what path you should take. Most times in the first in the main basic mode, you at least know what you should be doing. It's just hard to do. And I don't like that as much, but I don't know. We'll see. We might try and conquer it.
Awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to whatever you choose to do, and if you would like to catch KATOSEPE playing Celeste or any other game live, you can go to twitch.tv/KATOSEPE. It's a lot of fun. And you stream on Mondays, 4 to 6 p.m.?
Yes. 4 to 6 p.m. Pacific is normally when I'm at, yeah. Oh, and we've been playing Terraria. And you should also watch us play Terraria.
Terraria,
which is on Saturday mornings.
Yes, Saturdays. Has been an interesting experience for me. I feel like it's like relearning Minecraft for the first time, except like way harder because there's so much more going on. So I've been having an interesting time trying to just navigate like even the menus and like some of my instincts that come in with Minecraft, because it's the same thing, right? Like you have an inventory, you have the survival aspect, you have the mining aspect, and you have the enemy. You know, like you have everything that's there in Minecraft, except it's formatted differently and the pacing is different and etc. So it's been an interesting experience for me to just navigate this new world.
But you know what Terraria has, Adrian? Grappling hooks.
That is true. It does.
So 10 out of 10, best game ever.
And you know what does not have grappling hooks is Neon Abyss. Unfortunately, it would do very well with a grappling hook, considering there's a lot of movement in that game. But so there's a brand new game that has come out today, actually, called Neon Abyss. This is a side-scrolling shoot-'em-up roguelike. It's basically what I've been saying is that it is the best of The Binding of Isaac and Enter the Gungeon. It's a lot of shooting, it's a lot of guns, it's a lot of enemies, coming at you just like Enter the Gungeon, but it has the item synergies of The Binding of Isaac, and it has the pet familiars of The Binding of Isaac, and kind of like the floor layout as well. I guess the various floors are just like any roguelike, but the embargo lifted today, so I can talk about it. The game is absolutely tremendous. I see myself putting the hundreds of hours that I have put into Isaac already, and Gungeon and Nuclear Throne, all the other great roguelikes. Neon Abyss is, as Zeke's mentioned, really cool art style, tremendous gameplay, moment-to-moment gameplay. My only downside so far with Neon Abyss is the progression. So basically, the game has like a rogue legacy system where in between runs, or a Dead Cells system, where you upgrade elements as you go through. So, you might unlock a new character, or you might unlock a new item, whatever it is. It's more like Isaac in the sense of you unlock items in between runs. And the way that you unlock them is by defeating bosses. You get like a little token after you defeat a boss, and then you can spend your tokens on, unlocking stuff. Unfortunately, it costs a lot of tokens to unlock stuff from run to run, and so I have put in, I would say, 14 hours into the game over the past couple of days, and I haven't unlocked very much, but I have seen most of the game already. From what I hear from the developer, he plans on supporting the game for a long time. He has heard the I'm not alone in this progression system issue. He's heard that. He's probably going to be making some changes over the next little while. So in that sense, if you are a roguelike fan, and by the way, I'm going to have a review of the game coming out probably this weekend. If you're a fan of the game, the genre, I heartily recommend the game. You can take a look at. You'll see the game looks just tremendous, and certainly the enticing elements of things like Isaac and Gungeon are there. So anyway, that's what I've been doing.
Yeah, so Isaac, you unlock items fairly quickly, but there's tons and tons to get. So it sounds like maybe that's the approach he should be taking, where you're getting them quickly, but there's so many to unlock.
I understand the approach he wanted to take, which is like, hey, here's what you got, and then you're going to see how the game evolves over time. And as you learn the game, you're going to get new things that'll put like a little kink in what you're used to. Specifically, he has like these pages for skills. So like on page 1, you have a skill tree, and then on page 2, you have a skill tree, and you unlock these pages as you go along through the game. And once you unlock one skill in a page, in a certain page, that unlocks stuff that you didn't necessarily click on. It unlocks new enemies, maybe new bosses, though I haven't seen any, whatever. It kind of switches up the playstyle that you're used to. Totally fine. It's tremendous. It would just be way better if it happened quicker, and I was able to see more changing faster. But in any event, like, it's been fine for me. Like, this would be a deal breaker, actually, if the game wasn't absolutely tremendous. But I put in a lot of time in the game, and I haven't gotten bored. So I know that you kind of just have to know that you're in it for the long haul if you see the footage and you know it's your type of game.
I'm looking forward to seeing the review.
Yeah, the review, I'm calling it the You Should Play. That will probably be coming either Saturday or Sunday this weekend. And I'll have a shortened version of the review available on the daily update, and then it's also like in a longer form content on youtube.com/gaming_observer. Folks, that's going to wrap us up for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you to Zeeks for being here on the show. Kato, where can people find more of you?
videogameoftheday.com, where we have links to our social media and my show, Video Game of the Day, where we talk about different games from gaming history on Amazon Alexa devices. And I'm also on Twitch, I am on Twitch on twitch.tv/KATOSEPE. But I meant to say I'm on Twitter and Instagram at VG_of the day, like Video Game of the Day.
If you'd like to hear more... go ahead. Sorry.
No, that was it. That was
okay.
it. I just said and decided to ramble for a little bit.
If you'd like to hear more from me, as always, you can go to thegamingobserver.com. That has links to absolutely everything that we do. Otherwise, thank you, Kato, for joining me. And until next week, happy gaming, everyone.
Happy gaming, everyone.